All right, in this final section of 18, chapter 18, we're going to talk about reconnection and speciation. So reconnection is the idea that after two species have formed, maybe they run into each other again. Now, if they are not completely reproductively isolated, they may actually reproduce with each other. Insert a lot of various reasons for that, but the fact remains, it can happen. And when this does happen and individuals are formed that are hybrids, it's called a hybrid zone. So we see this with coyotes and wolves in North America. So we have wolves really occupying kind of Canada, and coyotes kind of operating in the continental U.S. And then we have a hybrid zone where coyotes and wolves actually are interbreeding, even though they are separate species. And those hybrids are colloquially known as coy wolves, and they just look like big, aggressive coyotes. We don't have them here in Ohio, as far as I know, but it's somewhat common in like New York and the Northeast, Vermont, those sorts of things. So in the hybrid zone, you can have a couple of things happen. You can have hybrids kind of go wrong. So if the hybrids are less able to reproduce and survive, then it's called reinforcement. So a good example of this is mules. If donkeys and horses reproduce, they produce mules who tend to be sterile. Not 100% of the time, but a lot of the time. If you have a hybrid zone where the two species are producing hybrids and doing it well, then it's possible that you would have fusion. And that's where reproductive barriers would continue to weaken, and you would just get more and more hybrids until the two species kind of melded into one. And we see that again in wolves. The red wolf is an endangered wolf in the southeastern U.S., and there was a lot of concern about the red wolves fusing with coyotes. And so there is some coyote DNA in the remaining red wolves, but they are separate enough where they are still considered two separate species. And finally, the last change in hybrid zones would be stability, and that's where fit hybrids will continue to be reproduced, but it doesn't cause a decrease or a decline in the other two species. The other thing we should think about in this section is varying rates of speciation. So sometimes speciation can happen really fast, and other times it can happen really slow. In the gradual speciation model, as you can imagine, species diverge gradually over time in small steps. In punctuated equilibrium, a new species undergoes changes quickly from the parent species and then remains unchanged for a long period of time afterwards. So we often think about evolution as we're thinking about it internally as like small changes over time, like maybe our ears slowly get bigger over time. And what the punctuated equilibrium model reminds us is just that sometimes big changes can happen kind of suddenly. And so maybe we have one individual with really big ears and it makes them super successful. And so then that mutation would get very, very popular in the population. And that would, kind of happen very quickly. And then it would be stable. And then something else would happen. And so there's just two different ways that we can think about speciation and rates. And while we aren't going to spend a lot of time on that through this course, it's just it's kind of an important thing that you can apply to your own life too. Are your habit changes gradual, or do you do it all at once? Which way is more sustainable for you? Okay, that's the end of chapter 18, and I'll see you in the next video.